Hello everyone, welcome back to PÖFF TV Studio. I'm Amin and we're right here in Tallinn, Estonia in Black Night Film Festival. Today we're gonna talk about a film, Flow. And here we have the producer and the screenwriter, Matiss Kaža, with us to tell us about what was happening actually in the process of making this film. So how are you doing today, Matiss?
Very well.
Matiss.
Yes.
Sorry. All right. So let's talk about the screenwriting.
Yeah.
Because the main boss is here. So let's talk about this, that in the characters of the film, we do have the company of the animals with the characters. Could you tell us like how it actually enhance the theme and characters by having the animal as a company? Does it even enhance or not?
So the idea for the script came from the director, who's also a writer on this project. And he had made a short film as a teenager about a cat who was afraid of water, but it's very short, like 6-minute movie. And after making his first feature-length animated film, he wanted to return to that story, but to expand it to be about kind of individualism versus collectivism in a sense. So it's about a cat who really has always been by himself and has looked up upon other animals with a degree of suspicion. And then this huge flood comes and it destroys the cat's home and it's forced upon this boat with other animals. And the challenging part of the screenplay was the fact that this, like all previous movies of the director Gints Zilbalodis, is completely dialogueless. So instead of the animals behaving like in movies like Madagascar, you know, where we have the dancing lemurs and everything, here they behave kind of naturalistically. They're supposed to follow their instincts as much as they can. And of course, we do take some liberties in order to make the story work. But in general, the animals behave like animals, so they don't talk. I mean, they do make noises, but they're in their own animal language. So our biggest challenge was that all of it was basically audio-visual storytelling without text. So we had to make that work on the page, and we had to make the characters work on the page because, of course, a lot of the tools that are later used in the film are things like camera, like music, like gesture, which are difficult to describe on the page. They don't work as well on paper. So that was one of the main challenges. And I think that creating this group of animals instead of a group of humans actually helps raise the empathy levels that the audience members have towards the characters. Because, for example, the cat is a bit snobbish and it doesn't always make the right decisions. And if it were a person instead of a cat, I don't think we would forgive them as much as we do when it's a cat, because the cat it suits a cat to be a bit snobbish, if you know what I mean. You kind of appreciate that sort of character.
Sure. All right, so let's get a bit more focused on the content and the words are trying to be said by the script. So in the film, we can see that we are talking about some environmental issues, like fragility of the planet, all right? So what sort of, how do I call it, like, what would you expect that audience gain from the film? When you're talking about this sort of, what would you expect to learn and then gain out of that sort of things that you have said in the film?
You know, there was no intention from us to have some sort of environmental message in the film. The intention was to focus solely on the cat's emotions and the emotions of this lonely kind of individualistic protagonist that comes into contact with the group. So we were more focused actually on the theme of kind of the individual versus the collective. When does it make sense to make your own decisions and judgments? When does it make sense to follow a group's instinct? When is it unwise? In the contrary. But of course we understood that because we chose not to have an antagonist like a bad guy in this film, but instead to do it with this flood, this natural disaster that appears in this world without humans, that people would have this kind of environmental let's just say, global warming context to the film. And we don't mind that, but it's just not what our initial intention was as to what the film is really, really about deep down. It's about fear. It's about overcoming fear. It's about overcoming fear of others to us as the authors. But we do realize that this context will probably be applied to the film, and that's good, I think, because the film does call attention to things that, I mean, paradoxically, right as the film came out, in the following months, we've been seeing floods like this in Spain, in other parts of Europe, and now in Florida and other parts of the United States. So it really calls attention also to potentially what can be a consequence of human actions. And you wonder, kind of, watching the film, where did all the humans go? We don't have a ready answer for that, because we actually never came up with one specific backstory, but you can imagine for yourself.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Okay. So, but beside of this, you have also some other words, like friendship and this sort of community, having a vibe of the community. So, what inspired you to actually show this sort of community, a vibe of the community, communication, and this friendship in the film?
You know, we see so many rough social dramas and films about very, very tough issues that are going on in the world, whether it's on a personal level or geopolitically. And I think that one of the interesting parts of Flow is that it's completely different to that. It's a fantastical experience, but it's also an experience that kind of is supposed to increase empathy towards others, no matter what their kind of beliefs or actions are. And all these animals are very different in how they behave and why they're there on this boat. And none of them is an antagonist. None of them is kind of like the bad guy working against the others. And what we wanted to do with this group of, you could say, unlikely friends, as they become throughout the journey of this film, is that we understand as the audience each of their motivations, and none of them are like corrupt. All the motivations are perfectly understandable, and each of them have their own little journey, becoming from one thing to another, except for, of course, the capybara, who stays the same all the time.
Okay, so in the film, this is actually mostly could be viewed by the director, but can also have some sort of roots in the script writing. We have some light-hearted, we call it sort of light-hearted scenes, and we have some sort of more serious scenes in the movie. How could you actually see and manage to catch the balance between these two sort of the scenes?
I think that's something that's very difficult to do. But I think the best of movies do this. I think the best of movies are not just all dire hardship or all very, very light. They manage to have this change of emotions, and sometimes very, very quickly. There's another animated movie this year that comes to mind which does this perfectly, which is Memoir of a Snail by Adam Elliott, which also manages to have this change of emotion, this roller coaster within the confines of one scene, actually, very often. So I think, I mean, it's a matter of constructing the experience, but then, of course, once we were finished with the script, the director took a very unusual approach, as in he never read the script after we finished writing it. So when working on the film, nobody actually worked with the full script. They were giving scenes to work with, like the animators, but never like the full script. So he did all of the animatic, which is kind of the in-between phase between the full animation and the screenplay, all by heart, by memory from the screenplay. And that led to impulsivity, like making decisions that might not have been in the initial script, cutting things out maybe that have gone out of memory because they're just not important, because you don't remember them anymore. And adding a few little details or a few changes on the way. And I think that's what brings this kind of liveness to it, that you're there present in the moment. And if you're present in the moment, then also your emotions can change in the moment.
Exactly. So basically, like the name of the film, everything
Yeah.
was on the flow.
It was even in the creation process, and
Yeah.
it's very nice that we had all of this creative freedom to work in this way, and that's why we were able to bring the result that is there on the screen.
Exactly. All right. And the last question before wrapping up is that, so you have two sort of big roles in this film. Right. So producer and a screenwriter.
Yeah.
So for having these sort of big roles, you have to have such a big first commitment, and first after that also like a skill to manage all the thing, like all the responsibilities for both roles. How could you actually manage this sort of challenge? Like you have two big roles in one film. So how could you manage it?
Well, I'm known kind of for the fact that I work on many projects at the same time, and this one was very long. It took 5 years.
Okay.
So we started in 2019, 2020-ish, something like that. And I started out on this project as a screenwriter. I was asked by Gints, the director, to work on the script, and only then, after we had already written most of the screenplay, he asked me to also produce the film. So the script was already in a very late stage at that point, and I didn't have to do much on it. But as a producer, this was my first animated film. I had worked on a bunch of live-action movies, documentaries before, but this was my first animated movie, and that was a new challenge for me to learn all of this as I go, basically. So that's why it was very interesting to me, to learn all the terminology about different aspects of 3D animation, the workflow, how things are done. So I managed by learning in this case, by finding everything new, and also it's my first co-production with 3 countries. I'd done a bilateral co-production, which is 2 countries before, but this one is my first one with 3, and it was quite the experience to manage all of that and find out about the different ways funding works and the different ways crew work in these different territories. So it was a learning experience, but also very, very exciting to do that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Of
It was
course.
such a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for coming up. And thank you so much once again for watching us. Don't forget to check our social media until the another interview. Have a great, great day, night, or whatever time you're watching us. See you around.